In this video, I'm going to talk about 10 tips, tricks, and shortcuts for Photoshop that I wish I knew in architecture school. In this first tip, we're going to learn how to use the alpha layer correctly. So this is the alpha layer that usually comes from your render. If you haven't been exporting your renders with the alpha layer, I recommend you start. The alpha layer is really useful in helping you to isolate out different parts of your image. So what you can do with the alpha layer is you can see all of the image that contains rendered objects is black and all of the image that is sky or the environment is white. So if you want to isolate out the sky for easier rendering, which would normally be very hard by individually selecting all of these portions in between the vegetation, just simply get your alpha layer, get the magic wand tool, right click on the white area, go to color range, just click OK. I leave these settings as they are. Now you've selected all the white areas in the alpha layer. Now to turn this into a mask on your image, you can do one of two things. If you go down to the bottom right in the layers tab and just click mask, it'll mask out everything apart from the sky. So now you have the sky isolated on its own layer. If you want to isolate out the opposite, so you want to remove the sky from the image using the mask, hold down Alt and click on the mask. This will isolate out using the white portion of the alpha layer. Now once your layer has been applied, there's a few key bindings you can use to your advantage. If you hold Control and click on the layer mask, it will select the layer mask and you can edit it based on this. If you hold Alt and click on the layer mask, it will isolate the layer mask and let you work on it easily. This helps you to quickly edit your masks. Then simply Alt click again on the layer mask to go back to normal. If you hold down Shift and click on the layer mask, it will temporarily disable the layer mask. You can see this is in effect given the red cross on the layer mask image. You don't only have to use things like alpha channels to mask out elements in your image. If you've done a render, I recommend you render out the material ID layer. This will assign a unique color to every portion of the image. This helps you to easily and quickly isolate out elements of the image for use in post-processing. So if you wanted to darken the roof sheeting in this render, rather than having to individually go in and try and select the roof, you could select all of that very quickly by turning on the Material ID layer, using the Magic Wand tool to select the color of the relevant object or material, and then you can use this as a mask to adjust the color of the roof. So you could create a new layer and paint in the color that you wanted to edit into this portion. Material ID layer is a useful tool in allowing you to control specific elements of an image. Push Q to enter Quick Mask mode. You can see on the right hand side the layer has turned red, which means you've entered the quick mask mode. Put your brush onto 100% black and paint onto the image the areas you'd like to select. If you make a mistake, you can just use the eraser tool by pushing E to remove it. Push B to go back to your brush tool and continue painting onto the areas of the mask you'd like to capture. Once you've finished, push Q. This will have selected the inverse of the area that you wanted to capture. So in this case, it has captured everything around the border rather than the border. What you need to do is push Ctrl Shift I to inverse your selection. Now you have the area in the quick mask selected. You can simply push copy, Ctrl C and then Ctrl V to paste it out onto its own layer. This is useful when you want to place people or other objects into composite images. Now when you're working with layers, if you control click on a layer, it will select the content. But if you alt click on the layer, it will zoom into the content on the layer. This is helpful for finding specific elements in layers, zooming in to edit them without having to jump through every single layer in the layer window. The next tip is isolating out layers in an image. When you've got an image with many layers and you want to work on a specific layer, it can get hard to find which layer an object is on and work on it without disturbing other elements of the image. Select a layer with the object on it you'd like to work on in isolation. Look at the Layers tab, hold down Alt and click on the eye icon. This will isolate the layer and hide all of the other layers. Now you can zoom in and work on this image in isolation from the rest of your composition. Now when you're working with images in Photoshop and you'd like to copy a portion of a layer, there's two ways you can do it. You can make your selection, and to copy this onto a new layer but leave it within the existing layer, push Ctrl J. As you can see, that has copied that out onto its own layer, but it's still on the original layer. Or if you push Ctrl Shift J, that will cut this out of its current layer and paste it onto a new layer. So now you can see it's been removed from the original layer and placed on its own new layer. Now this tip is using the brush tool. The brush tool is one of the most commonly used tools in Photoshop for doing touch-ups, painting in masks, painting in extra light, changing colors of objects in renders, or many other various uses. Now, instead of having to continuously go and change the settings of the brush manually in the top of the Photoshop window, there are some handy shortcuts you can know. Now, the brush tool can be opened by pushing the B button on the keyboard and then click and dragging. If you want to draw in a straight line between 2 points without having to drag your mouse, you can click on the first point and move your cursor to where you want the finishing point of the line to be. Hold down Shift and click. If you leave Shift pushed in and keep clicking, the straight lines will follow your cursor around the board. While using the brush tool, by holding down Alt, you'll get the eyedropper tool. Simply left click to take the color of that object and continue using the brush tool with that color. If you want to hold down Alt and right click at the same time while dragging your mouse horizontally, so left or right, that will increase and decrease the diameter of the brush. This is helpful for quickly changing size of brush while drawing. If you hold down Alt and the right mouse button while moving your mouse in the up or down direction, this will change the hardness at the edge of the brush. So you can see now it has a softer effect. You can use these to really speed up your workflow when you're working in post-processing. Are you sick of trying to zoom in and edit the corner of your image, but it just simply won't let you do it properly, and your canvas is constantly being centered on your screen and you just want to drag the corner into the center and work on that? Effectively, without having this option ticked, your zoom is always locked to the center of the screen. Go to Edit, Preferences, Tools, and select Overscroll. This allows you to scroll into the corner of the image and work on this in the center of your screen without having to work on it in the corner or an awkward position on the screen. So if you've ever made an image and you need to make it larger for whatever reason, but you don't have time to re-render out a scene and it's not a seriously large increase, you can use Generative Expand, and that will allow AI to fill out the remainder of your image. So just hit C for the crop tool and then increase your image by the amount that you need. Click the Generative Expand and then leave this text box blank. Just click Generate. This is really helpful if you just need to increase an image slightly to get a better fit on a page or presentation board, or just to increase the view area enough to give you a better perspective of the scene. This tip is useful for when you're trying to edit an image and whenever you try and select something, you're accidentally dragging the incorrect layer out of position. Just hit the lock symbol above the layer window and that will lock that layer in place. So now you can't click and drag that by accident when you're trying to edit other parts of the image. Now, one of the biggest tips on Photoshop is keeping your file organized. Sometimes when you're creating a really complicated image, you can have hundreds of layers and it becomes impossible once you've started working on the project to remember what layers have what content and what they're related to. So you can create layer groups in the layer window, hold down Shift and select multiple layers at once, then hit the folder icon to create a layer. Give that layer a name so you remember what it is. And what I like to do is use a color coding system on my layers to have all the different portions of the image in a different colored file so I can quickly know what I'm working on when looking in the layer window. To change the color of a layer or folder in the layer window, right click on the eye icon and simply select a color. I like to try and use consistent colors for the different parts of my image across projects, just so I can work quickly in my files and remember what I'm working on. And finally, we've got some quick tips and shortcuts for working in InDesign. If you need to use rulers in order to measure objects and make sure you're scaling things correctly, push Ctrl R. That will bring up the rulers. I like to work with these on so I can tell when I'm scaling components of the image and I know they're roughly the right scale. The next tip is pushing Ctrl 0, and that will fit your artboard or image to the window size, and that helps you to quickly scale the image neatly in the frame in case you need to show someone your work or just quickly view what your image is going to look like. And another helpful feature is if you push Ctrl 1, and what that does is it shows you the image at a 1:1 scale, which means effectively it's showing you the image at the scale in which it would be printed in its native scale without any scaling up or down of the image. This is helpful to know if your image is too pixelated to be used at a large scale on a print, or if you need to add more detail, or if there's any imperfections that you might actually notice when it's printed. Any questions, drop your comments below, and I hope that's helped.